Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey into one of philosophy's really fundamental questions. How do we truly experience the world around us? Is it, just a set of objective facts we observe, like reading some kind of scientific report?
Right, like data coming in.
Or is it something far more personal, maybe more deeply intertwined with our own living, breathing being, an experience that kind of shapes reality as much as it reflects it?
It's a massive question, and once you start to really dig into it, it sort of unravels so many of our common assumptions, doesn't it?
It really does.
We often live with this implicit separation, a kind of internal wall between our consciousness and the world outside. But what if that wall is maybe an illusion?
What if our very presence is the bridge?
Exactly.
And that's precisely where Maurice Merleau-Ponty comes in. Today we're diving deep into his revolutionary philosophical thought, particularly as it's laid out in his major work, Phenomenology of Perception.
Yeah, a truly foundational text.
This isn't just a book. It's a work that fundamentally shifted how we understand perception, the body, and, well, our very place in the world.
Merleau-Ponty really went head-to-head with this huge philosophical gap, this chasm that stretched across Western thought for centuries. I mean, thinkers like Descartes really cemented it, didn't they? Sharply separating the mind, the thinking substance, from the body, the extended substance.
That classic mind-body split.
Precisely. And Merleau-Ponty's aim was to bridge this gap, not through, more abstract theory, but by urging us to return to the things themselves. But, and this is key, with a radical emphasis on what he calls the lived body.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack that vision. We'll explore his key concepts, things like intentionality, the inherent aboutness of consciousness, the dynamic body schema, the really fascinating ambiguity of perception, and how we actively constitute our lived space and time.
And to really get a handle on how original his thinking was, we should probably put his ideas next to other big names, right? Like Husserl, Descartes, Locke, Kant.
Oh, absolutely. And compare them to whole schools of thought like empiricism and intellectualism, too.
Yeah, that'll help show the depth. Ultimately, our goal here is to uncover the foundational structures of your everyday experience. You'll hopefully see that the world isn't just out there waiting for you to passively look at it,
Right.
but that it's actively constituted, given meaning, brought into being through your embodied existence. It's not just a minor tweak in thinking, it's a complete shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Once you grasp it, it really changes how you see every single interaction you have.
Okay, so let's kick off this journey by looking again at consciousness itself. Merleau-Ponty starts with a concept that, honestly, seems almost too simple at first glance. Intentionality.
It does seem simple, doesn't it? Intentionality, this idea from Brentano, and later really central for Husserl, that it just refers to that basic directedness, the ofness or aboutness of consciousness.
Like when you see something. When you remember something.
Exactly. A perception is of a tree. A memory is of a past event. A desire is for something. Sounds almost trivial, like stating the absolute obvious.
It really does. But Merleau-Ponty argues that this seemingly obvious fact was, well, astonishingly overlooked, or at least deeply misunderstood, by a lot of early modern theories of mind.
Especially those rooted in dualism and representationalism.
Yeah.
He felt they created more problems than they solved, really.
So take Descartes.
Yeah.
He drew this incredibly sharp line, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. A clear, almost surgical distinction. The mind, that's the thinking substance, purely internal, self-sufficient, existing on its own. And the body, well, that's extended substance, just a machine, basically taking up space.
And that split just caused endless problems,
Yeah.
right? How does the non-physical mind even interact with the physical body?
Exactly. That interaction became this persistent philosophical puzzle. The bridge between them seemed, well, almost impossibly fragile, if not non-existent.
And then you have someone like Locke. He took a different route, but kind of ended up in a similar difficult spot.
Yeah, Locke suggested our perceptions are essentially internal mental ideas that represent external objects. So you don't directly perceive the tree itself, you perceive your internal idea of the tree.
Okay, so it's like a picture in your head.
Kind of. But the big issue Merleau-Ponty flags with this representationalism is the gap it creates between your mind and the actual world. If all you ever really get are these internal representations, these mental pictures.
How do you know they're accurate? How do you know they match reality?
Precisely. It inevitably leads towards skepticism. You're potentially trapped in your own mental cinema with no guaranteed ticket to the world outside. It makes our connection to reality really problematic, almost like a leap of faith.
So Merleau-Ponty flips this. He argues that intentionality itself holds the solution.
Yes, that's the core of it. What Merleau-Ponty gets at here is really profound. Your mind isn't some sealed chamber just passively getting copies of the world sent in.
Yeah.
It is, by its very nature, thrust into the world, already engaged with it, and in doing that, it inherently affirms the world's existence. The very aboutness of your consciousness means it's directed outward.
So it already implies a world exists for it to be about.
It has to. It implies a world, not just a collection of internal mental states. And this isn't just abstract philosophy. It's a huge shift in understanding how you are right now, directly and undeniably, with the world, not just looking at it from afar.
Okay, so if Merleau-Ponty isn't interested in breaking consciousness down into little mental bits or seeing it as just receiving representations, what is the main job of phenomenology then? He picks up Husserl's famous call, return to the things themselves, emphasizing description, not explanation.
That really is the heart of it. It's not about finding causal chains or giving scientific analyses in the classical sense. Phenomenology prioritizes the direct, immediate, lived description of our experience. It asks, what is it like to actually experience this, not what physical process caused this experience?
And this naturally leads to a specific view on science, right? He's not anti-science, but he thinks it operates on a different level.
Exactly. He's not dismissing science at all. He's critiquing its classical sort of objective approach, which he feels can be a bit naive in its starting assumptions. Science, he argues, is built upon the lived world, Husserl's Lebenswelt, that pre-scientific, pre-reflective world of everyday experience that we all inhabit.
Okay.
So science becomes a kind of second-order expression of that world. Think about it. A scientist measures the water temperature, gets a number. But before that measurement, there's the lived feel of the water, cold, warm, and immediate, meaningful encounter. Science aims to determine and explain the world objectively, but the perceived world has this deeper ontological sense, a fundamental way of being and meaning that science, aiming for objective facts, often misses or can't fully grasp.
And that connects to his critique of reducing humans to just scientific categories. We're not just biological machines or social units.
Precisely. If you reduce us to merely living beings, biology's view, or men, social anatomy's view, or even just consciousness, like in some psychologies, you miss something absolutely fundamental. For Merleau-Ponty, we are the absolute source of our experience. Our existence isn't just a product of biology or environment. Instead, it moves out toward them, and in doing so, it actually sustains them for us as a meaningful world.
So seeing ourselves as just a moment of the world from a purely scientific viewpoint is naive.
He thinks it's profoundly naive, yeah, because those scientific views implicitly rely on the very perspective of consciousness through which a world first even arranges itself around us and starts to exist as something coherent and meaningful. You need that perspective first before you can even do the science.
Wow, that is a genuinely unsettling thought, that our solid, everyday scientific facts rest on this deeper, maybe more ambiguous foundation of lived experience.
It is.
So this whole approach radically challenges how we understand our own observations, even how we interpret scientific findings. It's a stark reminder that all knowledge, every fact, every observation is ultimately grounded in our lived, embodied experience. It really invites you to pause and consider the very lens through which you encounter the world before you even start trying to categorize or explain it. It means the world you perceive as objective is, at its very root, tangled up with your subjective way of being. Okay, so if consciousness isn't locked away inside but is always reaching out, engaging with the world, then the next big question has to be, what's the main tool? What's the essential way this engagement happens?
And this is where Merleau-Ponty makes arguably his most revolutionary move. He reveals that the body isn't just an object we happen to have, like a car we drive. It is our fundamental and inseparable perspective on the world.
That's his central thesis, isn't it? That existence is essentially bodily.
It absolutely is. And what that means is we simply cannot understand our existence separately from its concrete physical conditions. Think about it. Your entire experience of the world isn't just influenced by your body. It's actually built and made real by how your body senses, moves, and interacts with everything. The phenomenal field, everything that appears to you, your entire experience, isn't just caused by the body. It's constituted by the body's sensorimotor structures and capacities. The very way perception is structured is the structure of your body in action.
So that phrase, my body is my point of view upon the world, that's not just poetry. It's a complete reframing.
Right.
You can't pull apart the perceiver and the physical means of perceiving.
Exactly. And this is where he really breaks from the philosophical tradition. Your body isn't just another object among all the other objects you might possess or use.
Right.
You cannot, in principle, observe your own body as just another thing in the room. You can walk around a chair, see it from all sides, pick it up. But your own body, you never truly observe it in that same detached, objective way.
Because you're always observing from it.
Precisely. As he puts it so vividly, you'd need a second body to observe your own, and that body would then become the unobservable perspective. It highlights this fundamental difference between yourself as an embodied subject and the world of objects. The body is that by which there are objects. Its permanence isn't just factual, it's metaphysical. It's fundamental to the very possibility of there being a world for you at all.
And this brings up that tricky translation point, the French term le corps propre, often translated as the lived body. But you mentioned one's own body is often preferred. Why is that nuance so important? What does propre really get at?
Right. Propre in French carries this dual meaning of both clean and one's own, or proper. In this philosophical context, it powerfully emphasizes that this body is my body, the one lived as uniquely mine in this undeniable, intimate way. It contrasts sharply with seeing the body as just another external object. The key nuance that one's own tries to capture is that it doesn't imply possession, like owning a car or a house, something separable from you. Merleau-Ponty stresses that our body is intrinsic, inalienable, fundamentally tied to who we are. It's not something we just have and control from a distance. It's a deep, non-possessive belonging. It is us, not something we have.
This inherent active body is also central to his idea of the body schema, which isn't just like knowing where your arms and legs are, is it? It's more dynamic.
Much more dynamic. The body schema is way more sophisticated than simple associationist ideas. You know, touch leads to movement like pressing buttons. It's not just accumulated experiences linking up mechanically. Instead, it's a global awareness of my posture in the intersensory world. It's a unified form, a gestalt, an immediate pre-reflective grasp of where your body is, what it can do, its potential for action. Think of a skilled athlete, maybe a basketball player driving to the hoop. They aren't consciously calculating trajectories and muscle tensions.
No, they just do it. Their body knows.
Exactly. Their body knows the whole movement, the whole situation.
So it's inherently dynamic, always geared towards action, actual or possible.
Precisely. Its spatiality isn't positional, like plotting points on a map. It's situational. He gives this great everyday example. Imagine you're leaning on a desk, really focused on something.
Okay.
In your awareness, maybe only your hands are really accentuated. Your shoulders, your waist, your feet, they sort of trail behind them like a comet's tail, as he puts it. You're not unaware of them, but that awareness is kind of enveloped within the awareness of your hands and your overall posture, which is directed towards the task at hand.
You have this absolute knowledge of your body's involvement without thinking about each specific part.
Right. Your body just knows what it's doing in relation to the world pre-reflectively.
And this really contrasts with how classical psychology often viewed the body, right? Almost like this separate machine that thought observes.
Totally. Classical psychologists often put themselves in this impersonal thought realm, looking from the outside in. They failed to grasp this fundamental difference between one's own body and external objects. They tended to demote the experience of the body to just a representation or a psychical fact, something science could eventually break down into objective bits, like nerve signals or muscle fibers.
But Merleau-Ponty pushes back hard against that objective thought.
Vehemently. He emphasizes the body isn't just in space, it inhabits space, it opens up space. And crucially, he says, far from my body being for me merely a fragment of space, there would be for me no such thing as space if I did not have a body.
Wow. That's a huge claim.
It's critical. Our body is the very foundation, the anchor point for our entire experience of space and really of the world itself.
Which brings us to experiences like the phantom limb. This isn't just some weird medical curiosity for him. It's philosophically significant.
Oh, hugely significant. The phantom limb phenomenon is a powerful case study for him because it shows the body's role goes way beyond just simple physiological mechanics. It's not just a faulty memory or a wish or a hallucination in the typical sense.
So what is it then?
Merleau-Ponty describes it as a revived perception, almost like a previous present that cannot commit to becoming past. It's this amputated limb that still feels present, maybe still itches or hurts. This reveals how things like emotion, memory, even underlying intention aren't just simple psychological triggers or physiological effects. They are deep existential attitudes that can motivate other states.
Like an emotional state could bring on the phantom feeling.
Exactly. An emotion or even just thinking about reaching for something can evoke the phantom limb. And interestingly, the phantom might even change, shrink, or feel different depending on the patient's emotional state, like their level of resignation or acceptance of the loss.
This must be a nightmare for purely mechanistic views of physiology, the ones that see the body as just parts outside of parts, a sum of separate processes.
Oh, it's a massive challenge. Mechanistic physiology really struggles here. If the limb isn't physically there, how can it feel present? How can there be sensation? Now, severing sensory nerves might sometimes make the phantom disappear, sure, but Merleau-Ponty argues the reason it appears in the first place isn't purely physiological.
It's deeper than that.
It's about a deeper psychical or existential determinant, a kind of continued intention or presence of the body image that persists beyond the physical facts. The phantom limb, memory, emotion, they're all, in his view, equivalent with regard to being in the world. They aren't just caused by a specific stimulus in a linear way. They are motivated by an underlying existential attitude, a way of being that transcends mere physical presence.
So it's almost like the body itself can become this hiding place for existence, a place where unresolved experiences or intentions linger.
That's a really poignant way to put it, and it captures his idea well. For some patients, the body can become a kind of hiding place. Existence gets tangled up there, maybe blocking their ability to move forward, to communicate effectively, to learn new ways of being. It powerfully underscores the body's role, not just as a physical thing, but as our primary way of engaging with and sometimes getting stuck in the world. It shows vividly that our being isn't just housed in a body, it is our body in all its complexity, ambiguity, capability, and vulnerability. #3. The ambiguity of perception and sensation.
Okay, let's dig even deeper now into how we actually perceive and sense the world. Merleau-Ponty argues it's way more nuanced and active than we usually think, especially when he goes after the idea that sensation is just a simple, passive reception of qualities.
Right, the old model. Classical science, chasing objective measurements, often pictured the sensory system like a simple transmitter. Push the red button, get a clean red signal, push hot, get hot.
Like a switchboard.
Exactly. Merleau-Ponty says, no, it's much more dynamic, complex, integrated than that. Even modern physiology, he points out, shows this constant collaboration not just between different bits of stimuli, but crucially, between our sensory systems and our motor systems. Our movement is involved.
How so?
Well, for instance, think about cases where someone has damage to their sense of touch. Detailed sensations might only reappear if they actively explore, if they move their hand, feel around energetically. This shows that our active engagement, our motor intentionality, is actually key to fully forming the sensation itself.
So we're not just passively receiving data feeds, we're actively building the sensation through interaction.
Precisely. Normal perception isn't about our brain just making a copy of the external world, like taking a photo. It's an active integration process where the world is constituted through our interaction. If someone suffers nerve damage, it doesn't just mean they lose certain qualities like they can't see red anymore. Often it leads to a less differentiated and more primitive structure of perception overall.
So it affects the whole way they organize experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a breakdown in the very organization of how they experience the world, not just a missing piece. This tells us that sensation isn't some standalone psychical individual, a neat, isolated unit of experience. It's already a formation already tied to an ensemble and already endowed with a sense. It's inherently meaningful from the get-go, wrapped in context, and really only differs in degree from more complex perceptions.
Which means perception thrives on ambiguity, it tolerates fuzziness, going way beyond precise, objective measurement.
This is such a crucial point and a huge difference between objective, scientific thinking and our actual lived experience. Science, aiming for objective measurement, often has to construct a sort of semblance of subjectivity by treating sensations as distinct things, imposing categories that really only make sense within that scientific framework.
But our actual experience is messier.
Much messier. Our lived perception is far more fluid, less precise, and often perfectly comfortable with uncertainty. Think about the Miller-Lyer illusion, those two lines with arrows at the ends. Objectively, the lines are equal length. But when you look at them, they cease to be equal. But they don't necessarily become definitively unequal either. They just become different. Perception tolerates this shifting, this haziness, what Merleau-Ponty calls bouger. It's fundamentally shaped by the context, by the whole visual field around the lines.
That's fascinating. It's like our perception isn't always trying to get an exact number, but more to grasp a relationship, a feel, a sense within the whole picture.
Exactly right. And we see this too in what he calls the lacunae in perception, the gaps, the incomplete information that are just part of normal seeing, not some kind of error or non-perception. When you recognize the shape of a crystal, you don't consciously count every single face and edge. You grasp the overall form, the gestalt.
Or recognizing a friend's face, you don't tick off eye color, nose shape.
No. You immediately grasp them, the whole expression, the identity, the classical theory of sensation, trying to build knowledge up from these clear-cut, determinate qualities, ends up constructing objects that are artificially cleansed of all equivocation. It's an ideal of knowledge, not the actual rich, often blurry way we live it. He even points out that things like size or color constancy are often more perfect in children than adults.
Really? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it suggests that as perception matures, it becomes more tied to the specific local stimulus, not less, as we refine our active engagement with the world. It's like a net, he says, where the knots become clearer and more distinct as we use it more actively to grasp things. He urges us. If we really want to understand sensing, we have to explore this pre-objective domain within ourselves, the world as it appears, before we start dissecting it.
Okay, this deep dive into sensation and perception leads him straight into a confrontation with the two big philosophical traditions that try to explain it all: empiricism and intellectualism. He thinks both miss the boat, fundamentally.
Yeah, and understanding why he critiques them really helps clarify his own unique position. Let's take empiricism first, the whole association of ideas thing. It basically views perception as a passive collection of separate little bits of data, like point A, point B, point C, that somehow get associated in the mind to form, say, the contour of an object.
Like connecting the dots.
Kind of. But the problem, Merleau-Ponty says, is that association only restores external connections. It assumes the original experience itself lacked any inherent intrinsic connection between those points. This reduces knowledge to just a system of substitution, swapping one mental atom for another without any real justification or understanding of why they belong together in the first place.
So if I see a red apple, empiricism might say I'm just associating redness and roundness and appleness based on past experience, and the meaning is just layered on top.
Pretty much. But Merleau-Ponty powerfully argues against this idea of projection of memories onto current sensations. He uses that great example of the proofreader's illusion, where you might read deduction when the text actually says destruction.
Yeah. Empiricism might say, oh, the memory of deduction is somehow projected onto the similar-looking letters. But Merleau-Ponty counters. Wait a minute. The present experience first took on a form and a sense before it could possibly recall specific memories. The illusion itself presupposes some kind of perceptual norm, a context where signification is born in the sensible world itself, not just imposed by memory from outside. Memories don't just float around and project randomly. The world already offers a structure, a meaning, and it's that structure that motivates the recall of certain memories, creating the illusion.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the other side, intellectualism? That's the view that perception is mainly about intellectual judgment, right? The mind sort of actively interpreting sensory data.
Exactly. Intellectualism tends to assume there's this pure general consciousness or mind that inspects the raw data, these blocks of space, and then makes judgments. Ah, that pattern of sensations means chair. It posits consciousness as this formal general activity applying rules or categories.
And Merleau-Ponty rejects that too. He does. He argues that attention, for instance, isn't just some general formal searchlight you can shine anywhere. It's a particular freedom to gain and a particular mental space to keep in order. When you first learn to distinguish colors, it's not just applying pre-existing labels. He calls it a change in the structure of consciousness. The institution of a new dimension of experience, a new quality, actually comes into being for you. Attention doesn't just clarify things that were already there. It realizes a new articulation of the world.
He also has that really intriguing example about eye movement, doesn't he? If your eye muscles are paralyzed, but you try to move your eyes, the world might seem to move instead.
Yes. That's a fantastic example. The illusion of the landscape moving when you intend to move your paralyzed eyes that isn't just some ready-made illusory phenomenon caused purely by the physiology going wrong. It's motivated, he says, by your intention to move. And by the way, the landscape is docile to your gaze, all as part of your dynamic body schema.
So it's not a conscious calculation. My eyes didn't move, therefore the world must have.
No, it's not an intellectual conclusion you arrive at. It's what he calls non-emphatic consciousness, a kind of pre-reflective, embodied knowing. It's like a skilled carpenter who just feels the wood, knows instinctively how to work with the grain without consciously analyzing the physics. Their body operates with a lived logic, responding to natural signs, the subtle feel of the tool, the resistance of the wood, without needing explicit thought or words. It's an embodied logic, a logic of action and engagement.
Okay, so if empiricism's passive associations don't work, and intellectualism's detached judgments don't work, what's Merleau-Ponty's alternative way these things connect? He talks about motivation.
Yes, motivation. This is a really key concept for him. It describes how phenomena trigger each other, but not through that kind of objective billiard ball causality. It's not A causes B. Instead, it's through the sense they offer each other an operative reason, or raison d'être.
Can you give an example?
Well, think of improvising musicians. One player plays a phrase, and it doesn't cause the next player's response in a mechanical way, but it motivates it. It offers a sense, a direction that the other player picks up and responds to, continuing the emerging meaning of the music. One phenomenon makes sense of another, guiding the flow of experience without needing an explicit intellectual plan. This leads to what he calls fluid concepts in phenomenology, meaning isn't fixed and rigid, but always emerging, shifting, relational. It's a dynamic way of understanding how the world shows up for us as meaningful.
And this connects to that important, maybe slightly technical term you mentioned earlier, Fundierung, which helps them bridge these different levels without reducing everything or making it purely mental.
Exactly. Fundierung founding is such a profound concept. Imagine, like you said, building a skyscraper. The bedrock, the foundation is absolutely essential. The skyscraper, the higher structure, depends entirely on that foundation. It can't float. But paradoxically, you only really appreciate the bedrock's true strength and significance once the building is constructed on it. The building gives the foundation a new meaning, a purpose beyond just being rock. That's Fundierung. The higher parts of our experience, abstract thought, symbolic language, complex reasoning, they don't just get caused by the lower bodily and sensory experiences. They emerge from them, depend on them completely, but they also, in turn, give those lower levels new form, new articulation, new meaning.
So it avoids collapsing thought into just sensation or having thought float free from the body.
Precisely. It prevents reductionism. The higher is just the lower. And also idealism, the higher is totally independent. It acknowledges this deep, ongoing interdependence, this continuing dialogue between the founding experience and the founded concept, where neither is fully complete without the other. #TAC4, our embodied relation to others and the world.
Okay, so if our body is our fundamental viewpoint, and perception is this kind of ambiguous, motivated, sense-making process, what does that mean for how we relate to other people? This is where Merleau-Ponty really digs into intersubjectivity, trying to get past that old philosophical trap of solipsism, the idea that maybe you can only be sure your own mind exists.
Right, the problem of other minds. It's a classic headache in philosophy. Husserl himself framed it as a paradox. How can another person be truly for himself, an independent center of their own consciousness, but at the same time appear for me within my field of experience?
If my consciousness is purely private, how do I ever know you're not just a really convincing simulation appearing to me?
Exactly. How do we confirm another actual subject rather than just an object that behaves like one? It cuts right to the heart of whether we even share a reality.
And Merleau-Ponty offers a characteristically embodied solution to this puzzle left by Husserl.
He does. He argues this paradox only really bites if you define the ego, myself, and the alter ego, the other, in complete isolation, detached from any concrete situation. His solution is pretty radical. My body has to be my exterior, the way I show up in the world, the way I'm visible and present to others. And conversely, the other person's body must be the other person himself, not just a shell containing a hidden mind.
So we encounter each other directly as embodied beings.
Yes, our existence isn't just private. It has to include the consciousness others have of it, which immediately implies our embodiment and our situatedness in a shared world, a shared history. Therefore, he argues, transcendental subjectivity, the very structure of consciousness, must be intersubjectivity. It has to already include others from the start.
This sounds like a pretty direct challenge to Descartes' whole I think, therefore I am, the cogito, which really starts from that isolated internal I.
Oh, it's a fundamental challenge. Descartes' cogito implies the I is only really accessible to itself, which kind of devalues or at least makes the perception of others and the world secondary and problematic. Merleau-Ponty insists that my existence can't just boil down to my private awareness of existing. It has to encompass the awareness that others might have of me, and therefore my embodiment in nature, my place in history. The cogito, for Merleau-Ponty, must find me already in a situation, already entangled with the world and with others. Only then can transcendental subjectivity actually be intersubjectivity, something Husserl also grappled with later on. It means our self-awareness is, in a way, already social from the ground up.
So things like solitude and communication.
Yeah.
They aren't polar opposites then. They're more like two sides of the same coin.
That's exactly how he sees it. They're not alternatives you choose between, but two moments of a single phenomenon. Our experience must present others to us. Otherwise, we couldn't even think about solitude, let alone communication. The very idea of being alone implies the possibility of not being alone, of being with others. He talks about a double anonymity. Our being in the world is, on one hand, anonymously individual, our unique lived perspective. But it's also anonymously general part of a shared human existence. We immediately grasp ourselves as kind of eccentric to myself, radiating an existence as quality into the world that others can perceive and engage with, understanding each other pre-reflectively through gestures, expressions, sharing space. This immediate embodied encounter is what makes real intersubjectivity possible before we even start thinking about it explicitly.
And this embodied intersubjective reality naturally flows into the social and historical dimensions of our lives, right? We don't live in isolation.
Not at all. Coexistence is possible precisely because of this basic fact of perceptual consciousness, that we're always already with others through our bodies. We coexist not just as physical beings in a natural world, but as people within a cultural and historical world. And our actions, our choices, our interactions, they don't just vanish, they become sedimented.
It's sedimented, like layers building up.
Exactly. They form patterns, traditions, institutions, collective meanings that profoundly shape our social reality, the very texture of our shared history. Think about how customs, laws, even the way cities are built, become embedded in our shared world, guiding our actions often without us consciously thinking about it.
He even takes on historical materialism, offering a kind of existential interpretation that sounds quite different from the standard economic determinism, the idea that economics drives everything.
It's a really interesting take. He critiques those reductive, purely causal versions of historical materialism that might just say economic conditions cause historical events. For Merleau-Ponty, it's not just that history is economic, it's that economics becomes historical, meaning human activity within economic structures becomes part of a meaningful historical unfolding.
So it's not just abstract forces.
No. History is shaped by the interplay of productive forces and forms, sure, but these only gain real significance when they emerge from anonymity, when they become self-conscious, when they are lived and understood by people. This coming to awareness is a deeply cultural, existential process, not just a mechanical result. He stresses that economic relations are only effective insofar as they are lived and taken up by a human subject, often wrapped up in ideological rags, in interpretations, feelings, beliefs. They're integrated into our lived world, not just abstract forces acting upon us.
So because the economy is part of the total and concrete existence of society, there can never be a purely economic cause in the simple way we might think.
Precisely. The economy isn't sealed off. It's always tangled up with our values, our perceptions, our beliefs. He connects this to our existential commitments. He suggests, for example, that a philosophical idea like solipsism isn't just an effect of, say, private property in a simple cause-effect chain. It's more like the same existential commitment to isolation and mistrust is projected into the economic institution and into the conception of the world.
Wow, so our deep attitudes and our social structures reflect each other.
They're intertwined. He insists that man isn't just a psyche joined to an organism, like a mind loosely connected to a body. We are this back and forth of existence that sometimes allows itself to exist as a body and sometimes carries itself into personal acts. Mental motives and bodily events overlap and blend because there's no purely mental act without some physiological basis, nor any purely random physical event that doesn't intersect with our intentions somehow. It's this constant fluid shift where biology opens into human behavior and instinct can become emotion, defying neat separation.
This gives such a richer way to understand social life. It suggests that even big economic trends or historical shifts aren't just impersonal forces. They're deeply connected to our lived experience, how we perceive each other, our fundamental ways of being in the world. It's a profoundly human-centered perspective on history and society. It reminds you that your everyday actions and experiences, all added up, actually contribute to that larger historical picture. Okay, if the body is our fundamental viewpoint, our way into the world and connecting with others, what about something as uniquely human and cultural as language? Merleau-Ponty argues language isn't just a simple container for thought, like an envelope you put a pre-written letter into.
Right. This is another area where he really pushes back against both the empiricist and intellectualist camps, finding their explanations for language just lacking. Empiricism, for instance, tended to see language as basically automatic reflexes or associations. Words were like inert shells, empty boxes with no meaning of their own until you associated something with them.
And intellectualism.
Intellectualism saw words as just external signs pointing to inner, pre-existing thoughts, as if the thought was fully formed in your head, perfect and complete, and then you just dressed it up in words to communicate it. This strips the word itself of any real power or efficacy.
So in both views, the word itself is kind of passive or secondary.
Pretty much. And both, Merleau-Ponty argues, completely miss the crucial point that the word has a sense, a meaning that's intrinsic to it, part of its very being. His really groundbreaking insight here is that language doesn't just presuppose thought, it actually accomplishes it. Thought, he says quite provocatively, is in the words.
Wow. So the act of speaking is the act of thinking taking shape.
Exactly. The choice of words, the articulation, the very act of speaking isn't just packaging up a preformed idea. It's the process by which the idea comes into being, finds its form, gets articulated. Language isn't a translation of thought. It's more like the creation of thought in that moment.
This points towards a more gestural or existential understanding of speech where the body is really actively involved in making meaning.
Absolutely. Language has an inner depth, a meaning, but it's not some locked-off private thought waiting to be let out. Instead, speech is the subject's taking up of a position in the world of his significations. Our mental life, our cultural life, he suggests, borrows its structures from our natural embodied life. The thinking subject is fundamentally grounded on the embodied subject.
So the physical act of speaking matters.
Tremendously. The phonetic gesture, the way we shape sounds with our mouths, throats, breath, produces a certain structuring of experience, a modulation of existence itself, both for the speaker and the listener. Our body, when it speaks, isn't just making noises, it's embodying meaning.
He uses the example of aphasia, language disorders, to really drive this home, doesn't he? Showing words aren't just labels for concepts we already have.
It's a really powerful example. Think about certain types of aphasia where a patient might be completely unable to use the word no in a purely linguistic task, like if you ask them to repeat it or use it in a sentence correctly.
Right.
Yet paradoxically, that same patient might easily and forcefully use no to express a lived negation in a real situation, refusing something, expressing frustration. This shows so clearly that a word isn't just a static item in your mental dictionary. It's tied to an attitude or function of speech. It's an instrument of action, a way of being in the world, not just a neutral label. When words lose that connection to lived experience, lose their genuine sense, Merleau-Ponty notes they can even seem to change in their perceptible quality, becoming kind of empty, losing their vitality.
It's like the body itself becomes the thought in the act of expression.
That's exactly what he calls the miracle of expression. The body literally becomes the thought or intention it signifies. It's the body that shows, that speaks, embodying the meaning directly. He often pointed to Cézanne's painting. Cézanne learned that true expression isn't about forcing an intellectual idea onto the canvas, but about letting the expression emerge as the language of the thing itself, born from its unique configuration and the painter's deep embodied engagement with it. For Merleau-Ponty, the world and our own body present this challenge. Everything resides within the world. Our body is the medium through which meaning emerges from the world, and through which we express that meaning back.
And this embodied way of understanding extends naturally to how we think about habit. Habit isn't just knowing facts or an automatic reflex.
Not at all. Habit, for Merleau-Ponty, is much deeper than that. It's a knowledge in our hands, acquired through sustained bodily effort. And crucially, it's something you can't just translate into objective instructions. It's not explicit conceptual knowledge you could write down in a manual.
Like riding a bike. You can't just explain it.
Exactly. Or think of a skilled typist or an organist lost in the music. The typist's fingers fly across the keyboard, not following a consciously mapped out path for each key, but as a fluid modulation of motricity, an intuitive float directly expressing the words. The organist reaches for stops and pedals not through explicit knowledge of that one is over there, but through the musical signification of the gesture condensed in that location, an immediate response to the sound they're creating and hearing.
So the body itself understands, almost instinctively, without needing step-by-step conscious commands.
Precisely. When we acquire a habit, the body understands by letting itself be penetrated by a new signification, by assimilating a new meaningful core into its very way of moving and being. The body isn't just responding passively, it's incorporating new meanings into its motor repertoire. Our body isn't just one expressive space among others. It is, he says, the origin of all the others, the very movement of expression. It projects meanings outward, gives them a place, makes them exist as things for us. The body is our general means of having a world.
So habits aren't just limiting constraints.
No, they also enable our freedom. They give a bit of renewable action and independent existence to our fleeting moments of freedom, providing a stable background against which new actions and meanings can emerge. Habit, then, is just one mode of this fundamental power of the body to both understand and express, to be our way of engaging meaningfully with the world. #Shack6. Constituting space and time through embodied existence.
This embodied perspective completely transforms how we understand even those basic structures of reality, like space and time. Merleau-Ponty really challenges the classical idea of lived space as just being this neutral, external box everything sits in.
Yeah, traditional philosophy and psychology often treated space as this abstract, objective container like a grid or a geometrical void or maybe a set of relationships known by a completely disinterested subject, just looking on from the outside. Even Kant's idea of a single universal space as a pure form of our intuition gets questioned by Merleau-Ponty.
So what's his alternative?
He argues our actual experience of space is deeply personal, it's dynamic, and it's fundamentally constituted by our body's orientation, our posture, our capacity for movement. It's not just out there, it's a field of action for us, shaped by our potential interactions.
And that famous experiment with Stratton's goggles really highlights how deeply our body shapes our spatial world, even when things get turned upside down, literally.
Oh, the Stratton goggles experiment is perfect for this. Subjects wore these goggles that flipped their vision, inverted the retinal image so the world looked upside down. Initially, as you'd expect, the world seemed totally inverted, unreal, and their movements were all wrong reach left, hand goes right, chaos.
Right.
But here's the fascinating part. Over days, normal perception gradually started to reestablish itself, and eventually subjects reported feeling that their own body and the objects around them were upright again, especially when they were actively doing things, moving around.
So they didn't just mentally calculate the inversion.
No. The reorientation of up and down wasn't a conscious mental calculation, not an intellectual judgment like, okay, I know it's flipped, so I'll just reverse my actions. It was an overall act of the perceiving subject, a complete embodied recalibration. The features of the environment, the walls, the floor, doors acted like anchorage points, pulling the sense of vertical towards themselves, reestablishing a new, lived spatial level for the body. Not a mathematical one, a lived one.
So space isn't just a pre-given container. It's actively constituted by our body's orientation and its interaction with the surroundings. It's a space of potential action.
Exactly. And this leads to insights about things like depth. Depth, he argues, isn't just a relation between objects out there, like one thing being behind another. It's a primordial depth, the thickness of a medium devoid of things, this fundamental dimension that allows objects to appear at all. It comes from our being situated in relation to a level of distances and sizes, how we're positioned, how far we can reach, and a certain scope of our gestures, a kind of hold of the phenomenal body upon its surroundings. Depth is fundamentally about our bodily relationship to the world.
And he says existence is spatial.
That is, through an inner necessity, it opens to an outside. Yes. This inherent opening through our body creates not just physical space, but also mental space, worlds of significations where meanings can take root. And those ambiguous perceptions we talked about, they're the ones we actively give sense to through our bodily attitude, or the ones that respond to the questions our body implicitly asks of the world. An initial perception totally without a background, without the context provided by our body's orientation, is, for Merleau-Ponty, basically inconceivable.
This dynamic embodied take on space naturally leads to how he sees lived time. Again, it's not just a static objective line.
Right. Classical thought often treats time like a series of separate coexisting now points, like beads on a string, or maybe like an object laid out before thought that you can measure objectively. Merleau-Ponty argues this constituted time, this objective, measurable time, really belongs more to the realm of space and the static present. It's immobile, distinct from ourselves, and it completely fails to capture the feeling of passage, the living experience of time flowing, unfolding, becoming.
So for him, real time isn't just there. It comes about. It's actively happening, always unfolding.
Yes, time must come about. It's never completely constituted, never finished or fixed. Every synthesis of time, bringing together past, present, future, is simultaneously taken apart and remade by time in this ongoing flow. The objective view of time as a neat linear sequence is an abstraction we make from our lived experience. For Merleau-Ponty, subjectivity is time itself.
Subjectivity is time.
Yeah. Time only exists for a subjectivity. For a conscious being without consciousness, the past would be gone forever, the future wouldn't exist yet. But equally, this subjectivity is time. It's not in time like an object. It is the unfolding, the passage. This echoes thinkers like Hegel. Time is the existence of the mind, and Husserl's ideas about the self-constitution of time. Our consciousness is the temporal flow.
Which implies that our perception isn't just jumping from one isolated now to the next. It's constantly weaving the past into the present.
Absolutely. Perception confirms and renews a kind of prehistory within us. The present isn't just a razor-thin edge. It has depth because it preserves a past in its present depth, condensing it, making it relevant for what we're doing now, what we anticipate next. He even talks about eternity in a fascinating way, not as some separate, static realm beyond time, but as the atmosphere of time, the unchanging backdrop against which all change happens.
So even mistakes become part of this flow towards meaning.
In a way, yes. Even a false thought or a wrong action, he suggests, lays a claim to eternity, becoming a necessary stage towards later truths, or part of the enduring structure of meaning. This leads back to that profound insight about the relationship between fact and reason, the unreflected in reflection time and eternity, that relationship of Fundirum. The founding term, like time, raw fact, perception, is primary, because the founded term, like eternity, reason, thought, is its determination, its articulation. But crucially, the founding only truly appears, only gets its full significance through the founded. It's this dynamic, interdependent dance between the implicit and the explicit, the lived and the conceptualized.
Okay, so if we are this deeply embedded in our bodies and the world with others, actively constituting space and time, what happens to our idea of freedom? Merleau-Ponty dives right into this, arguing pretty strongly that freedom is not absolute or totally unconditioned, like some other existentialists, maybe Sartre might suggest.
Right, that's a really important point of contrast. He challenges that idea of absolute freedom, where consciousness is seen as creating itself from nothing, condemned to be free, totally responsible even under extreme duress like torture. Merleau-Ponty sees a real paradox in that kind of absolute freedom.
How so?
Well, if freedom is always total, if you can just choose to be completely different at any given moment, then it risks becoming this sort of idle freedom. It paradoxically gives free rein to determinisms, because if every choice is equally unconditioned, equally possible without real cost or commitment, then no single choice truly anchors you or defines a path. You're just sort of floating, constantly rewriting your script without any real narrative thread. If actions can cease to be your own at any moment, they never really become your own in a meaningful way.
So he argues for a more conditioned freedom, one that's tangled up with our situation, our body, our history.
Exactly. We don't choose ourselves starting from nothing in some kind of existential vacuum. Freedom, for Merleau-Ponty, isn't about tearing yourself completely away from your engagements, your situation. It's an ongoing exchange with the world, a constant negotiation. Our total choice of character, who we fundamentally are, often isn't some single dramatic decision, but more like the silent springing forth of our being in the world, the way we implicitly orient ourselves, the projects we take up.
Through these tacit decisions.
Yes, these unspoken, embodied commitments that articulate our field of possibilities. Our freedom lies in weighing these anchors in how we take up our situation, how we engage with the given facts of our existence, not in pretending they don't exist. This isn't a Kantian view where consciousness just imposes its categories onto a passive world, finding only what it put there. It's more like a Singebung, a giving of sense that fully acknowledges our profound situatedness within a world that already has texture and meaning. Our freedom emerges from within our situation, not outside of it.
And this connects really nicely with his ideas about facticity and transcendence, the idea that our existence itself has this fundamental indeterminacy built into it.
Yes, human existence has this inherent principle of indetermination. And crucially, this isn't just because our knowledge is incomplete, like we don't know the future. It's part of its fundamental structure. Our very being is open-ended, constantly involved in the process of making sense out of ambiguity, transforming mere chance into reason through our choices, our actions, our commitments.
So every choice we make is kind of creating new meaning.
Exactly. That's transcendence. The movement by which our existence takes up for itself and transforms a de facto situation, a given reality. We don't just react to facts, we incorporate them into our projects, giving them new meaning. And we never definitively leave anything behind because that tension between the given facticity and what we make of it, transcendence, is what defines our existence. We are always taking up facts into ourselves, weaving them into the narrative of our lives.
He even applies this to something as fundamental and personal as sexuality, seeing it as having a metaphysical significance way beyond just biology or psychology.
This is really crucial for understanding his holistic view. Merleau-Ponty strongly resists reducing sexuality to just a biological drive or some psychological mechanism. For him, sexuality is internally linked to the whole thinking and acting being. It has a metaphysical signification, meaning it's fundamental to our whole way of being in the world precisely because you can't understand it if you treat a person just as a machine or a bundle of separate instincts. It concerns us as conscious, free beings who experience the world, project meaning, and relate to others.
So it permeates everything.
There's an osmosis, he says, a mutual diffusion. Sexuality spreads throughout our entire existence, and our existence permeates our sexuality. It becomes impossible, he argues, to neatly separate out the contribution of sexual motivation versus other motivations for any given action. Our actions almost always have this double sense, simultaneously expressing our drives, our choices, our history, our broader engagement with the world, all woven together.
And the body is absolutely central to this constant interplay, this metamorphosis between the given and the chosen.
Absolutely critical. The body, he says, transforms ideas into things and my mimicry of sleep into actual sleep. It doesn't just follow mental orders, it actualizes existence. It's actuality. But it's also the site of our vulnerability, the possibility for my existence to resign from itself, to make itself anonymous and passive, to fall into habit, to be overcome by illness or fatigue. As we saw with the phantom limb, existence can get tangled in the body, which can become life's hiding place, hindering our forward movement. This highlights the body's profound role, not just in enabling our freedom and transcendence, but also in anchoring our facticity, our limitations, our situatedness. It's this constant dynamic interplay.
So pulling this all together, what does it mean for how we understand reality itself? He seems to offer a way to understand the lived world that gets beyond those old arguments between realism and idealism.
He really does try to carve out a path between those two historical poles. To live a thing, he says, is neither to coincide with it, like a naive realist might imagine, simply absorbing an external objective reality as it is, nor is it to think it straight through, like an idealist might claim, or the subject's mind entirely constructs the thing.
It's something in between, or beyond.
It's more that the world is inseparable from the subject, who is always a project of the world, and the subject is inseparable from the world that it projects. This fundamental state of being in the world overcomes those old alternatives of realism versus idealism, contingency versus reason, nonsense versus sense. It's a dynamic, interwoven relationship where subject and object, mind and world, body and consciousness mutually constitute each other in experience.
It's almost as if the world itself becomes the homeland of all rationality, the place where meaning and reason actually originate.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it, and it captures his core insight perfectly. The world, as Merleau-Ponty reveals it, is the homeland of all rationality, the cradle where significations are born, where our embodied experience first makes sense. But he also reminds us that the normal subject, precisely because they have sensory fields and a body open to the world, also bears a kind of gaping wound through which illusion, ambiguity, error, and vulnerability can always enter. Our representation of the world is inherently vulnerable.
So even our most objective perceptions are grounded in this embodied, situated, and potentially fallible experience.
Exactly. That inherent vulnerability and ambiguity aren't flaws to be eliminated. They are fundamental, inescapable aspects of being human, enriching our understanding of what it truly means to exist and perceive within the world. #tag outro.
Wow. What an incredible journey through Merleau-Ponty's thought. We've covered so much ground today, really exploring his groundbreaking vision. We've moved way past those traditional mind-body splits, haven't we? Shattering the idea of a detached mind looking at a mechanical body. To see the body instead as our fundamental way of being in the world, of making sense of the world, from intentionality's inherent aboutness to the dynamic body schema, from perception's fascinating ambiguity to that interplay of freedom and facticity. His philosophy just invites you to rediscover the really deep, often pre-reflective ways you engage with reality every single moment.
And that concept of Fundirung, or founding, it really does illuminate so much, doesn't it? How our higher level thinking, our language, our reasoning, it's all deeply rooted in our primary embodied experiences, but it also transforms them, makes them explicit. It's this constant, never quite finished dialogue between the lived foundation and the concepts we build upon it.
Yeah, it's a powerful way to think about it. And for you, listening, hopefully understanding Merleau-Ponty helps you appreciate the incredible richness and complexity of your own everyday experiences. It lets you recognize that logic of the world that your body taps into and how your vision, your language, your sense of who you are, none of these are isolated things. They're all integral, interwoven parts of your unique being in the world.
It definitely challenges us to look beyond those overly simplistic objective explanations and really embrace the inherent ambiguity, the active engagement, and the sheer depth of human existence.
So, as you go about your day, here's something to maybe mull over. If our body is truly our general means of having a world, as Merleau-Ponty puts it, and if even our most abstract thoughts are founded upon these deep, ambiguous sensory experiences, what does this really mean for the future of artificial intelligence?
Yeah. AI is attempting to know the world, but without a body, without that lived experience, without the inherent indetermination and ambiguity that Merleau-Ponty sees as defining us. What essential depth, what kind of understanding might such an intelligence always lack, precisely because it's disembodied, because it doesn't have that gaping wound of vulnerability or the capacity for genuine existential motivation that seems so central to our way of being? It's a profound question to ponder, reflecting on your own uniquely embodied place in the world.